What is up, NFL fans? Welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Round. I am Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach KT Smith as we break down all the latest NFL news after Week 14. Coach, what's going on?
What's up, Jeff, man? Ready to talk about another stupid Kansas City Chiefs victory by a narrow margin. I'm getting bitter about these wins by the
It
Chiefs.
is. It's stupid, like you said, and that's why I titled the podcast, Is It Better to Be Lucky Than Good? Let's start off with, this is exactly where we're going with the first topic. The Chiefs continue to live dangerously. Reminds me of Austin Powers. They beat the Chargers Sunday night on a walk-off field goal that banged off the left upright and through the goalpost. It was Kansas City's fourth win this season by 3 points or fewer, and it gives them their 9th straight AFC West title. And coupled with the Buffalo Bills loss to the Rams, Kansas City has a 2-game lead for the number 1 seed in the conference. Narrow escapes or not, are the Chiefs winning the AFC again? Let's put a pause on that final question, and I just want to get your take on the Chiefs. I watched a good bit of the Sunday night game. Lucky, I think, is appropriate. But, Coach, what's your take on the Chiefs? Has it changed at all?
Well, I mean, they're certainly not as explosive as they were a couple of years ago. And I think that that's a combination of a couple things. Patrick Mahomes slowed down a little bit. I mean, he's still a pretty young quarterback, but he's got a lot of tread on his tires now. And yeah, I think the league is caught up a little bit to what Andy Reid and company are doing. But that said, they've been able to remake themselves as a top-notch defense. And they still have a guy in Mahomes at quarterback who is one of the 2 or 3 best in the league at what he does, and he knows how to win games. So, I mean, I just think that they're not a dominant football team, but they know how to win, and that counts for a lot.
So Kansas City, they win. They're averaging 23.7 points per game offensively. And those numbers are aided, I think, predominantly from how they did in the early portions of the season. But we've said this a million times on this podcast. It's their defense. It's giving up 19.4 per game that is keeping them in games. And they kept Justin Herbert and company in check the entire game and had them confused. In the second half, the Chargers came out and they actually did make something of it. But I don't know. It's the Chiefs offense that has me wondering what is going on. It just feels like they are this prodding offense that just kind of just moves the ball down the field. There's not really anything explosive. They do have Xavier Worthy. They still have Travis Kelce, even though he's on the back end of his career for sure. I don't know. If they go up against an explosive offense, do you think this offense of the Kansas City Chiefs is going to be capable of going toe-to-toe with one of these higher-powered offenses, whether it's the Detroit Lions, the Baltimore Ravens in the playoffs? Hell, even the Pittsburgh Steelers look explosive compared to Kansas City.
Well, Kansas City's shown time and again that they can beat all those teams. And, I mean, they've gone up against Buffalo on several occasions in the playoffs when it really counts, and been able to outscore the Bills. I don't know if they're built for that this year, but their defense keeps doing what it needs to do to keep them in the game long enough for the offense to win it. And that's really all that matters, man. Their formula right now is sort of defense first and let Mahomes do what he's got to do at the end of the game. And that, again, I don't know if that's sustainable all the way through. But until teams start to beat them consistently, then it'll work for them. I mean, I think it's easy to forget that their defensive coordinator, Steve Spagnuolo, won a couple Super Bowls with the Giants and was brilliant at stopping Tom Brady and that juggernaut when they needed to. So he's a guy who in big games has produced. And I think the combination of Spagnuolo and Reid is probably as good as anybody in the NFL from an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, head coach standpoint. So for me, I don't know if they're winning the AFC, but they're certainly the favorite. I don't see a team out there that should be favored over Kansas City.
Okay, I'm going to go out on a limb and say they are not going to win the AFC. I don't care if they get the number 1 seed or not. I don't think this team is as good as they were in the past. And I've been proven wrong a million times. It wouldn't be the first or the last, but I think there's another team that's going to do it. And I don't even know who that team is right now, because you watch Buffalo and their defense had issues against the Rams, but they could have and probably should have been able to get that ball back and had a chance to win the game at the very end of that game against the Rams. We'll talk about that in a second. But the Chiefs, we haven't talked about the officiating on the show in a couple weeks, and I feel like we got to bring it up again because I hate the NFL officiating. I think it's atrocious. It's awful. Any other adjective you want to use. But then there's the conspiracy theories out there. Coach, have you put on your tinfoil cap yet and said, boy, the NFL is really looking after the Chiefs this year?
No, man, I don't. I just don't believe that. Like I believe that star players get treated differently than everybody else, and that Mahomes gets that treatment. I think it's a star treatment that you see at times. But if you want me to buy into the notion that there's some sort of orchestrated conspiracy to make sure that the Chiefs continue to win, I'm going to pass on that one.
I'm all in. Let's do it. Let's talk about another AFC team in the second topic here that is definitely putting, well, they took a step backwards. That's the Buffalo Bills. Mentioned the shootout loss, 44-42 in LA against the Rams. It was a very exciting game. A lot of points, no turnovers. That was what was remarkable about that game. But Josh Allen became just the second quarterback in NFL history to both throw and run for 3 touchdowns in a game. And he set an NFL record with his 5th game where he had more than 1 rushing and passing touchdown in the same game. In your opinion, is Josh Allen the league's MVP?
Well, I mean, the numbers are pretty compelling. I mean, if you look at it from a statistical standpoint, I mean, he's got over 3,000 yards passing. He's got 23 passing touchdowns and another 9 rushing. So he's accounted for 32 touchdowns against just 5 interceptions. He passes the eye test. He looks like the best quarterback in the NFL to me right now. And that he's capable of putting together just these monster games. I mean, you mentioned it. I mean, 3 rushing touchdowns and 3 passing touchdowns in the same game. It is remarkable. So I think he's probably the front runner. I guess I'm old school in the way that I'm still pretty partial to the impact that running backs make on games. If Saquon Barkley breaks the NFL rushing record, the single season rushing record, which right now he's on pace to do, and the Eagles end up being, a top 2 seed in the NFC, I'll be partial to wanting to give it to Saquon Barkley, but I know I'm the minority. I think the voters favor quarterbacks, and if you're going to pick a quarterback right now, Josh Allen's the guy.
And I think there is a lot of it that is recency bias, and Josh Allen putting up these gaudy statistics towards the end of the season will definitely help his case. I'm going to say that yes. I'm going to say that yes, he is right now the front runner for the most valuable player award. And I would be okay if he won it because he has been playing really, really good football. And until the little slip up there against the Rams, I think that the Bills, and mainly because of Josh Allen, have been playing fantastic. I want to ask you, though, not to get away from the MVP talk, because I think Saquon Barkley deserves a lot of credit. I want to ask you about this game. Did you get to watch the Bills-Rams yesterday?
Yeah, I love watching those 2 offenses. I mean, I'm a big Sean McVay fan, so I spent some time watching that one for sure.
As a coach, what were you thinking when the Bills, with just over a minute left, still having all 3 of their timeouts, did the QB sneak and got stopped short and had to burn one? What were your thoughts?
That was a very curious call.
Tom Brady. I mean, I don't like Tom Brady necessarily as an announcer, but he did not let that go. And rightfully so. It was a bad call. But so you agree with Tom?
It's too risky there. Like, you need to, if you don't get the ball back on the ensuing onside kick, you need all 3 of those timeouts or the game's over. And that's just too risky a call when you've got plenty of other options in that spot. I mean, you can go play action pass. You can run something to the boundary. There's an awful lot of things that you can try to do there that won't result in you burning that timeout if you don't get it. So it felt like, I mean, they were outside the 1 yard line. I mean, if you're like on the 6-inch line, you're a foot to go. I get it. You should be able to make that. But you got 1.5 yards almost to make. And that's just too much in that situation.
I don't think that decision, although it sucked, I don't think it took away from that game, because that game was wildly entertaining. And Matthew Stafford still shows, and Puka Nacua, by the way, I mean, is there a better young receiver in terms of route running and his ability? He doesn't have like that freakish nature of some of these receivers you see, but man, is that guy a tactician. I love watching him play. I know you hate receivers, but what's your take on the Rams?
I like the Rams receivers. You know why I like the Rams receivers?
Because they block.
Because they block. Because in that offense, you have to block.
Yeah.
You have to block. Those guys are tough. They're great route runners. They're a treat to watch. There's so many interesting elements to the Rams offense. The shifts, the motions, the pocket movement, all the play action passes, the boot game. I really just think that that it's an offense that if you're a fan of football and you really want to see it something well crafted, that's a pleasure to tune into. And they've got two perfect receivers and a cerebral quarterback in Matthew Stafford. They're a team that's catching fire at the right time, and if they get into the playoffs, could be a problem for some of the heavyweights in the conference.
Yeah, I was going to ask like what you thought about the Rams and the NFC West. I mean, the Seahawks win again, so they obviously have a strong hold on the first place as of right now, but there's a big divisional game coming up on Thursday night between the Rams and the 49ers. 49ers are coming off of a big win. Do you see Seattle holding on in the NFC West?
Well, obviously that was a huge win for San Francisco. They looked like San Francisco the other day.
Yes.
But without McCaffrey, I find it hard to believe that they're going to be able to overtake Seattle. It just feels like they're going to wind up being a little bit short. They're minus Ayuk, they're minus McCaffrey. I think Seattle's a pretty good football team too. But when you start looking at the NFC playoff picture, I mean, it feels right now like you're only going to get one team in from the West. But with Washington now, at 8-5, man, they slip up a little bit. The Rams could sneak in. I just think the Rams are built for the playoffs with their experience and their head coach and some of the tricky things that they do on offense. So they'd be a dark horse team for me to watch in the NFC.
Absolutely agree with you 100%. Keep your eye on the Rams and how they play, especially with a short week this week. Let's go to topic number 3. It's been an absolutely miserable season for the Las Vegas Raiders. They're 2-11, and they lost 28-13 to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Sunday. However, there's been a bright spot with the Raiders, and that is Brock Bowers. He broke the record for most receptions by a rookie tight end. Bowers now has 87 catches, which leads the NFL and is just shy of 1,000 receiving yards. Should Bowers be in the conversation for Offensive Rookie of the Year? What say you, Coach?
Yeah, absolutely. He absolutely should. He's going to wind up with over 100 catches. He's going to wind up with well over 1,000 receiving yards. He's doing it in an offense largely devoid of weapons. I mean, they traded arguably their best playmaker earlier in the year with Devontae Adams. They haven't had any kind of an elite quarterback. They've been rolling with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. And Bowers has been that focal point, which is rare for both a tight end and a rookie. He's really kind of the sort of the poster child, so to speak, for the new breed of tight ends in the NFL who can move. I mean, he's a 245-pound tight end who runs a 4.39 40. I mean, he can move, he can block. He comes out of that Georgia system, which is pro built. I mean, Todd Monken was the OC there when he started at Georgia. So he's got a pedigree there that translates really well to the NFL game. As much as I don't like wide receivers, I love tight ends. Love tight ends because to me, they're just the most complete players, the most complete football players on the offensive side of the ball. So I think, Jaden Daniels cooled off a little bit. Bo Nix has had a good run, but certainly hasn't blown people away all season long. The most consistent rookie all year has been Bowers.
A quick clarifying question here for you. If you were voting on this award, the Offensive Rookie of the Year, does the fact that Brock Bowers was catching passes from these lesser than quarterbacks, we'll put it that way, I'm trying to be nice, for an Aiden O'Connell who got injured again, and as you mentioned, Gardner Minshew, does that play into this, the fact that he's doing this without a legitimate quarterback? Or is it just like, it's going to be tough because it's just the numbers?
That's a great question because it depends on how nuanced the voters really are.
Right.
Like if you're putting everything onto the scales, then you have to consider the scheme, the system, the organization. Brock Bowers is catching passes from second-tier quarterbacks, and his OC is Luke Getsy, who was fired by the Bears last year and is not exactly done much to ensure that he'll be employed next year by the Raiders. Meanwhile, you got Bo Nix, who's with Sean Payton, who's a noted quarterback developer, and you got Jaden Daniels, who's with Cliff Kingsbury, who's had a ton of success with Jaden Daniels type QBs. So clearly, Bowers is in the least advantageous situation of the three, and that is arguably having the best season. I think for a nuanced voter, that matters. But again, I don't know if if it's an in-depth thing or if they just look at the numbers.
And maybe it's because the Raiders are 2-11. I don't know. You don't hear a lot of talk about the Raiders outside of, are they in the Shedeur Sanders sweepstakes still, and who are they going to draft? Because they're going to be at the top, near the top of the draft order. But Brock Bowers isn't getting attention at all. And it just doesn't seem like the national media are talking about him. And I get it. The Raiders are bad, but you can't let that detract from what he's doing. He is literally doing it by himself. And, there's Jacoby Myers, but he is the number one weapon for the Raiders. He's a huge bright spot. We'll see how it plays out in the final weeks of the season, because we know the Raiders are not going anywhere. So let's go to another team that's not going anywhere, the New York Jets. They are mathematically eliminated from the postseason. Not that we knew that. And they lost in overtime to Miami, falling to 3-10 on the season. The Aaron Rodgers era has been a disaster by all metrics in New York. The Jets will need a new head coach next season, a new general manager. In all likelihood, there's a chance they're going to need a new quarterback if they don't want to deal with Rodgers. If you were New York, where would you start to fix this mess? This is a tough question.
It is, man, because there's a lot of moves that they have to make. I would start by not bringing back Aaron Rodgers. I mean, that would be my first move. Like, I'm going to part ways with Aaron Rodgers. I think they're going to have to take a big cap hit to do it. It's going to be in the neighborhood of $40 million or so. But he's not the right guy for that situation. I'm not saying that there's not a right place for Aaron Rodgers in the NFL. He threw for over 300 yards in Miami. He could probably still play in the right situation. But in a team that needs a complete rebuild, that has notoriously lacked a culture, he's the wrong guy right now, man. He's just not the guy at this point in his career that you want to try and build a team around. So for me, I would start with that, and then I would move on to the general manager before I hire a head coach. I thought this was an interesting piece of information. The Jets have hired the consulting group that calls themselves the 33rd team. They run a website, which is kind of interesting website, but I mean they're headed by former Jet GM Mike Tannenbaum and former Vikings GM Rick Spielman, and they got a bunch of former NFL front office people. And they're going to basically do like a search for the Jets. I wonder if Mike Tannenbaum will come back and say, like, hey, the best guy is me. But, he had a good run as the Jets GM there. But I thought that was really interesting and a bit of an unorthodox move. Essentially, the Jets saying, we don't really trust ourselves here. Let's see if we can farm this out a little bit. But it seems like they're going to start with the GM.
So let's go all the way back to before the season started, when Aaron Rodgers misses, what was it, mini camp, because he was out in Egypt or something on a vacation. And I talked about how they butchered this situation because they just excuse it. Yeah, Aaron's not here. We excuse it. We knew he was going to be out of town. It is what it is. They could have said that, and they didn't. It became this big thing. This is another example of the Jets screwing this up. So let's say you're going to use the 33rd team. Why make that public? Yeah. Why would you tell anyone in the media, anyone that you don't trust, to keep it hush, that you're using a website that, I'm sorry, but the 33rd team sounds like someone went to a GoDaddy.com, got the domain, and is like, yeah, we're just going to start our own website. Oh, do you want to help us rebuild our organization from the inside out? What are they doing? This sounds so stupid. From everything that they've done, from that, talking about the rumors with Aaron Rodgers, all the way to how they fired their head coach, they fired their GM, they've botched the Aaron Rodgers mess. I'm not going to get rid of Aaron Rodgers, though, and take on that cap hit until I bring in the people that they are going to tell me whether they want Aaron Rodgers. So I see what you're saying. Okay, let's go with GM first. I'm going to hire a general manager. And then that general manager and the front office, we're going to say, okay, let's get the coach. And then the coach and the GM, we're going to sit down and say, do we want Aaron Rodgers? Because if you're rebuilding, it's pointless. It's absolutely pointless to have Aaron Rodgers on the roster. But if you think that defense, which still is a pretty good defense, they haven't been playing great this season, you have some weapons on offense. You could bring back Devontae Adams if you want. You still have Garrett Wilson. Breece Hall is still a dynamic player. Then maybe you say, let's not rebuild this thing. We think we can win, and let's keep Aaron Rodgers around. I think that's the order of operations that I would go. General manager, coach, and then let the coach and GM decide how they want to move forward, You with me or are you against that approach?
Well, I mean, my perspective just comes from a little bit of experience, man. When I got the head coaching job at our high school, we were coming off of back-to-back seasons where we'd gone 3-7, and things were kind of a mess. But we had a really good incoming senior class. Our most talented players were seniors, and I thought we could win right away. And I put up with things that I wouldn't put up with for a minute right now, in the name of pacifying some of those kids or their parents, or because I thought we could win games. And we didn't. We went 3-7 again for the third straight year, right? And we went 3-7 with a crappy culture. And the lesson I learned from that experience was you have to build the culture. The culture matters. Why did the Steelers have a winning record every year? Because they have a great culture. What do they have in Kansas City? A great culture. They've got great players too. They've got great coaches. But it starts with the work habits, the day-to-day. If you bring back Aaron Rodgers and you let him do his thing in the summer and you let him go on the Pat McAfee show and passively aggressively trash the organization every week, and you let him abide by a different set of rules than everybody else, I just don't think it's going to get any better. I just think they need to bring in a guy who's got a vision for the franchise, clear the slate, and say, let's start building this thing from the ground up. That's just where I would go.
Hey,
I mean, you can make the argument Rodgers can still play. I get that. I just don't know if you can win with that.
Okay, so let me ask you this follow-up question, and then we'll leave the Jets because we don't need to spend more time on them. Do you think Aaron Rodgers plays anywhere in 2025, or do you think he retires?
I think if he wants to play somewhere, he'll play somewhere. I think there will be enough teams who will need quarterbacks that will be willing to look at, especially if he plays well over the next several weeks, that will be look at his performance and say, hey, I think we can make it work with him.
Any teams come to mind next year? If it's not the Jets, who?
I'd be hard pressed to think about something off the top of my head, but
Brett Favre, Vikings.
Let's revisit that question. What's that?
No, do the Brett Favre. Go to the Vikings.
Yeah, you'd be following Favre's path exactly. Right?
That would be. I know that David Stefano, who covers the Vikings, is not okay with that because I've talked to him about this before. But boy, that would be compelling stuff there to have him go to Minnesota because they said they're not talking with Sam Darnold. They're not having those communications right now about a new contract. So unless you're hitching your wagon to JJ McCarthy in year 2, coming off of no experience and a knee injury, I don't know. We'll see. All right, let's go to our 5th and final topic here. This is something that I don't follow, and yet we don't really talk about, is it college football. But Coach wants to talk about college football, so we'll talk about college football. The NCAA rolled out its first ever 12-team playoff bracket. The undefeated Oregon Ducks are the number 1 overall seed in the upstart Boise State. Boise State and SMU are in the playoffs, while perennial powerhouse Alabama is out. What do you think of the first attempt? But before we do that, let me outline what this looks like. So the first round is going to be December 20th to the 21st. Friday, you have number 10 Indiana at number 7 Notre Dame. Saturday, you have 3 games. Number 11 SMU at number 6 Penn State. That's a 12 o'clock game. 4 o'clock is number 12 Clemson at number 5 Texas. And then at 8 o'clock, Tennessee, number 9 at number 8 Ohio State. And then you have the quarterfinals, which you obviously have the teams that got a bye are going to be waiting for those other teams. So you have Boise State, Arizona State, Oregon, and Georgia are waiting. Coach, this was weird. This is different for me. I want to get your take before I give you my thoughts. What exactly was your take on the 12-team playoff bracket?
Well, first of all, I could not be any more excited for this. I mean, I love college football. I watched 11 straight hours of college football on Saturday, when the championship games from 12 noon till they were over 11 o'clock at night. And so I'm really excited to see how it plays out. I think there's some flaws in the system. I think giving the automatic buys to the winners of the conferences, 4 out of the 5 conferences, without reseeding them is a mistake, because an Arizona State or a Boise State to be able to get a first round bye over some of the teams that are ranked higher than them is probably a bit of a flaw, and they can work that out over time. But I think they've done a nice job of sort of building the excitement. They made the games really matter more so than ever before this year. And I think that they did a great thing by excluding Alabama. And I don't say that as an Alabama hater, I'm not. But Alabama's got 3 losses. And I think to sort of say like, hey, some of these teams like an SMU that was really competitive all year long and lost just 2 games. They lost their conference championship on a walk-off field goal to Clemson, who's no pushover. But we're going to exclude them because Alabama's a bigger name and maybe a bigger draw. I just think that was a smart decision because it values what you do on the field. I mean, Alabama had a couple big wins this year, but they got blown out by a bad Oklahoma team and they lost to Vanderbilt. And to me, if like you lose to Vanderbilt and Oklahoma when Oklahoma's having a down year, you shouldn't be in the conversation for the national championship. So I admire. I thought they had some guts in making their selections, and I think there's some compelling matchups. Man, SMU Penn State, that'll be an awesome matchup. That is football in the 21st century versus Penn State, which is like a traditional football program, man. Because it's going to be a fast, no huddle, up tempo team against a traditional powerhouse. And I think watching that Boise game, even though I hate that stupid blue turf of theirs, will be entertaining as well. I'm psyched for it.
So I like what it's done. And I follow college football just because of Pez's Picks. If you haven't checked out Pez's Picks, it's our gambling podcast at Fans First Sports Network. My buddy Pez, your buddy Pez, you've had him on your Call Sheet podcast before where he talks about the games. And so I followed college football through that. I will say this. I like what the 12-team format has done, whereas if you lose a game, your season's not over, and you're not praying and hoping that other teams lose that are ahead of you that might get you back into that picture. But the one thing I hate is they need to take this and turn it it's too much like a beauty pageant right now, where you have all these people who are on the selection committee, and they're looking at all these teams and saying, well, let's see here. How many losses did they have? Who did they play? How did they finish in their conference championship? I think they need to have a criteria like the NFL. This is how you make the playoffs. Here's the wins. Here's the losses. Here's the ranking, the tie-breaking procedures. And if that means that they have to take college football and turn it into 4 mega conferences, and those mega conferences will each have so many representatives, and it's very clear cut, then I'm all in on it. Then I can say this is fantastic. But right now, it's still, I hate the fact that there's a selection show. And everyone's sitting on pins and needles like, oh my gosh, is Alabama going to get in? They're the SEC. How do you compare SEC competition to what Boise State played and SMU played? I understand that they had 3 losses, but you can't compare that competition. So that's where it comes into a beauty pageant. I don't like that. I want to see it like the NFL. At the end of the day, no one questions who gets in and is out of the playoffs. Why? It's clear cut. Here's how it is. Either you get in or you don't. I think they have a ways to go. Do you like the selection committee, or do you hope that that's the future for college football?
I like that the selection committee allowed some of these other teams the opportunity to get in rather than, going chalk, so to speak, and stacking the deck with the perennial powerhouses. I like that they because I agree with you put SMU in the SEC and they're probably going to wind up with at least 3 losses.
Right.
But you really, it's really hard to play that hypothetical game. You can only go by what did happen. And I mean, Alabama did lose at Vanderbilt. They did lose at a bad Oklahoma team by 3 touchdowns. And it holds you accountable on a weekly basis. You got to win. And that's what I liked about their process.
So agree or disagree? College football, they better hope some of these games don't completely suck. So in other words, if SMU goes to Penn State and they are just completely outclassed, I don't think that's going to happen because I don't think Penn State's as good as some people say they are. But if they get absolutely their doors blown off and then Boise State hosts a game and they get crushed, I mean, then what's college football thinking? I hope the games turn out to be good. We've always talked about, you think about Appalachian State going into the Big House and shocking Michigan all those years ago. What could they have done? Or recently, like you look at the TCU Horned Frogs and they get their doors blown off in the national championship game. You look at back when Manti Te'o was with Notre Dame going up against Alabama and they get their doors blown off. College football wants compelling television. I hope these games play out. I hope they do. I really do. But All
Yeah, me
right,
too.
Coach. Go ahead.
I think they've done a really nice job too, though, of slotting it in schedules when football it has a peak interest. You don't
Yes,
get that month off between the rivalry games and the bowl games. I thought
true.
that was brutal because it
Yeah.
just diminished interest in the whole process.
Yeah. Now, real quick before we leave college football, do you foresee college football going the way that I suggested, where you have 4 mega conferences and it is very clear cut as to how you get in and how you don't? Or do you think that they like this committee approach where it's this level of intrigue the NFL does not have?
I don't know about that back end part, but I absolutely see the mega conference thing happening.
Okay.
I think you'll eventually see a separation where you won't have 130 Division One schools. You'll basically have 60 or 70, whoever can afford to be in that high bracket, separating themselves from many of the others.
True. All right, let's finish this up with a player profile back in the NFL. We're talking Bryce Young, Coach. Go ahead.
Yeah, Bryce Young, man. Here's a nice little comeback story going on here, right? Bryce Young was had a rough first year and then gets benched about 4 weeks in this season by the Panthers. They bench him for Andy Dalton, who I don't think anybody knew was still in the league until he took over there. And
Yep.
and then Andy Dalton gets injured and Bryce Young's got to come back in the starting lineup. And since he's engineered, a couple of wins and 2 almost massive upsets. I mean, Carolina had the Chiefs beaten a couple weeks ago until a Mahomes thing at the end happened.
Yep.
And then, my goodness, man, if their rookie wide receiver Xavier Legette hangs on to a post route with about 40 seconds left, that would have probably given them a victory over the Eagles in Philly on Sunday. So, I mean, Bryce Young it's not like he's suddenly morphing into Josh Allen, but he's playing much better, much more competent football. And I think he's a really good story that underscores the notion that, like, sometimes these young quarterbacks they need to sit. Sometimes they need to sit and watch, sit and learn. You can't tell me that he didn't gain some perspective by sitting and watching a veteran like Andy Dalton operate for a few weeks. And I don't know exactly what he gleaned from that, but he's been much, much better since then. So, the rush to get these guys on the field sometimes does them a disservice. I think that he's an example of that.
Yeah, it's a lesson for all NFL teams out there that have trying to rush a quarterback out there earlier than they do, but also kudos to Bryce Young. I go back to when Kenny Pickett in 2023 was injured and he's coming off injury. Mason Rudolph was the quarterback and Mike Tomlin chose to stick with Mason Rudolph. And Kenny Pickett was interviewed and they said, "What did you learn by watching?" And he said, "Nothing." That's a damning statement. Now, Bryce Young, he could have sat there and pouted and done nothing, but no, you could tell that he learned from Andy Dalton, that he took something from not being in the mix and just watching. And I hope his career pans out because, I mean, you don't want to see guys flame out like that all the time, especially number 1 overall draft pick. So, yeah, I like Bryce Young. I think he's a good player. Is he going to be an all-pro? I don't think so, but could he be serviceable? Could he be a quarterback for the future for the Panthers? We shall see. Coach, you're going to be going to a game this weekend, are you not? I'm going to plug that a little bit.
Heading to the link to see Steelers Eagles.
You wearing
That'll be
Steelers
exciting.
gear?
Pittsburgh has not won in Philadelphia since 1965. So that's a little concerning for a Steelers fan. But I'll tell you what, being in the link, that's a great vibe. Eagles fans are, let's just say, enthusiastic. And if you are wearing the other team's colors, they will let you know that they do not approve. So it'll be a great environment there. And, I'll be excited to report on it.
Are you going to be wearing your Jack Lambert jersey?
I don't own any jerseys, which is, I feel I would wear a Jack Lambert jersey because he's older than me. But the idea that, a man in my 50s is wearing the jersey of a 24-year-old just feels weird to me.
Hey, I'm with you, man. I don't do jerseys anymore. When Ben Roethlisberger retired, people had gotten me every Ben Roethlisberger jersey imaginable. I said, no more jerseys. I don't wear jerseys anymore. It's just, I don't know. I turned 40 and I was like, I just can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
But will you wear Steelers stuff or you just kind of just lay low?
I got to probably wear a Steelers hat like the one I got on right now. So
okay. All right. Good for you. Good for you. Well, enjoy the game. And what's coming up on the call sheet?
Well, I'm going to say this, man. I'm still working on some ideas for the call sheet this week, but I'll use this opportunity real quick. So I am about to end a 33-year teaching career. I have 2 weeks to go, and then I will come aboard Fans First full time.
Yeah.
And the call sheet's going to get restructured, and so we're going to, rather than do one weekly show, we're going to do 5 shows every week, a daily show Monday through Friday. That'll be a much shorter 15 to 20 or so minute show. So I'm really kind of in the process of now transitioning a lot of stuff in anticipation of that move. So I'm excited, man. I'll keep everybody aware of what changes we have going on. But yeah, the call sheet's about to become a daily show, so I'm excited for that.
That should be fun. That should be a lot of fun. In the meantime, Coach, hey, thanks for your time, man. Enjoy the game. I can't wait to talk to you next week. Take it easy.